How do you explain a wound that was caused by something that never happened? Not a blow, not an insult, not a moment you can point to and say, that right there, that's when it went wrong, just an absence, a space where something was supposed to be and wasn't. The conversation that should have happened after you came home upset and didn't. The curiosity about your inner life that a parent should have shown and never quite did. The feeling of being fully seen and emotionally held by the people who were responsible for you that somehow never arrived. And the hardest part is this. When you try to talk about it, you don't have a story, you have a feeling. A persistent, difficult to name sense that something essential was missing without any clear evidence of what went wrong. Because nothing went wrong, not visibly, not dramatically. The house was fine, the parents were there. The childhood, by any standard measure, was adequate. And yet, today we're looking at 10 normal habits that are actually signs of childhood emotional neglect. The kind of wound that doesn't leave a mark on the surface and leaves a very specific mark on everything underneath. If you've ever felt like something was wrong with you, but you couldn't find the event that caused it, this might be why. Childhood emotional neglect, a term developed most fully by psychologist Dr. Jonice Webb, is defined not by what a parent did, but by what a parent failed to do. Specifically, the consistent failure to notice, attend to, and respond adequately to a child's emotional needs. This is not abuse. It is important to say that clearly. Most parents who emotionally neglect their children are not cruel, not absent, not harmful in any way they can see. Many of them are loving. Many of them are doing their best. Many of them were themselves emotionally neglected and are simply passing along the only model of parenting they know. What makes CEN so difficult to recognize is that it is defined by absence. You cannot photograph something that didn't happen. You cannot point to a moment that didn't occur. You can only, with great difficulty and often with great guilt, point to the space where something should have been and say, it wasn't there. The child who grows up in this environment does not learn that their emotions are bad. They learn something more insidious, that their emotions are irrelevant, that the inner life, the feelings, the needs, the specific experience of being a person is not something that other people notice or respond to. And that conclusion, formed before the child has words for it, shapes everything that follows. Let's look at what it shapes. Habit 1. Feeling like your emotions are too much for yourself and everyone else. You feel something, and the feeling is immediately followed by a judgment. This is too much. Not a judgment from outside, a judgment from inside, automatic, preemptive, arriving before the emotion has even had time to fully form. The sadness is too much sadness. The anger is too much anger. The need is too much need. The frustration, the grief, the joy, the want. All of it tagged before it reaches full expression with a warning label that says excessive. On the surface, this looks like being emotionally controlled, like being reasonable, measured, someone who doesn't make a fuss. But the mechanism underneath is specific. In a household where a child's emotions were not responded to, not punished, not forbidden, simply not noticed or not met, the child draws a conclusion. The conclusion is not that the parents are limited. The conclusion is that the emotions themselves are the problem, that they are too large, too inconvenient, too much for the environment to hold. And the adult who carries this does something particular. They become their own first censor. Before the emotion can reach anyone else, before it has a chance to be received or rejected, it is managed internally, reduced, made palatable. Not because the person is naturally restrained, because they learned very early that the unmanaged version of their emotional life was more than anyone around them was equipped to handle. the feeling of being too much did not originate in you. It originated in an environment that could not hold what you felt, and the difference between those two things matters. Habit 2. A deep discomfort with needing anything from anyone. You are good at not needing. It is one of your most practiced skills. The ability to handle things yourself, to not impose, to figure it out without involving anyone else. And the discomfort that arises when you actually do need something from someone, a ride, help, emotional support, a favor, is disproportionate to the ask. It is not the mild awkwardness of requesting assistance. It is a deeper thing. The sense that needing makes you a burden, that every request is a withdrawal from an account you're not sure has enough in it, that the appropriate adult posture is self-sufficiency, and anything less than that is a regression. This doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a specific early experience. Being in an environment where needs, emotional needs specifically, were consistently not met. Not denied, not punished, just met with enough absence that the child's nervous system learned to stop extending them. The self-sufficiency that results from this is real. It is often impressive. People who grew up with emotional neglect are frequently some of the most capable, least demanding, most independently functional people in the room. And they pay for it, in isolation, in the loneliness of never being able to simply receive, in the exhaustion of handling everything alone, not because they can, but because the alternative never felt safe. Habit 3. Difficulty identifying what you actually feel. The I don't know response. Someone asks you how you feel about something, and the honest answer more often than you'd like to admit is, I genuinely don't know. Not, I don't want to say. Not, I'm choosing not to share. But an actual difficulty in locating the feeling itself. A blurriness in the place where the answer should be, as though the emotional signal is present, but the decoder is missing. Psychologists call this alexithymia, difficulty identifying and describing emotions. And it is one of the most consistent findings in adults who experience childhood emotional neglect. Not because the emotions aren't there. They are. But because the process by which a person learns to recognize, name, and communicate their own internal states is not automatic. It is learned. It is learned in childhood, in the thousands of small interactions where a parent mirrors back what a child is feeling. You look sad, you seem frustrated, I think you might be scared. When those interactions don't happen, when the emotional life of the child is not reflected back by the caregiver, the child doesn't develop the vocabulary. Not the literal vocabulary, though that too. The internal vocabulary. The ability to identify what is happening inside themselves with enough clarity to name it and act on it. If you find it difficult to know what you feel, if you frequently arrive at I don't know, not as a deflection, but as the genuine truth, the difficulty is not a deficiency in you. It is the predictable result of growing up in an environment that did not teach you the language of your own inner life. Habit 4. A persistent sense that something is missing, but you can't point to what. Everything is fine. By every measurable standard, your life is adequate, maybe more than adequate. There is nothing identifiably wrong. And yet, underneath the adequate surface, there is a persistent, low-frequency hum, a sense of something missing, not something lost. You can't locate a moment when it disappeared. More like something that was never there to begin with. A space in the architecture of your inner life that was supposed to be filled and wasn't. This is one of the most distinctive experiences of CEN, and one of the most difficult to communicate to someone who hasn't felt it. It is not grief, because grief requires something that existed first. It is more like the absence of something you can't quite name, that you notice most in moments when other people seem to feel something you don't. A a sense of groundedness, of belonging to themselves, of being at home in their own lives in a way that has never been quite available to you. Dr. Jonice Webb calls this the fatal flaw feeling, the persistent but non-specific sense that something is fundamentally wrong with you without any clear evidence of what it is. It is the signature experience of emotional neglect, not a wound from something that was done, but the shape of something that was never given. Habit 5. Feeling fundamentally different from other people without knowing why. You have felt this for a long time, probably since childhood, though it may not have become conscious until later. The sense that other people are operating with a set of instructions you were never given. They seem to know how to ask for things without apology. They seem to experience their own emotions without the immediate impulse to suppress or manage them. They seem to inhabit their own lives in a way that looks natural and effortless. And when you try to do the same, it feels slightly performative, as though you are approximating a way of being rather than simply being it. This sense of fundamental differentness, of being behind a glass wall that separates you from some essential quality that other people have, is one of the most isolating effects of CN, and the isolation is compounded by the fact that you cannot explain it. You weren't abused. Your childhood was fine. There is no story that accounts for why you feel this way, and so the differentness becomes a secret, something you carry without mentioning, because mentioning it without a justifying story would sound like self-pity or exaggeration, or the kind of dramatic claim that your upbringing taught you was unacceptable. You're not fundamentally different from other people. You are fundamentally under-equipped in a specific area, the area of emotional connection to yourself, because the environment that was supposed to teach it didn't. The difference you feel is not a defect, it is a gap. And gaps can be addressed. Habit 6. An overdeveloped sense of responsibility for other people's feelings. When someone near you is upset, something activates in you that goes beyond empathy. It is not simply feeling for them, it is feeling responsible, as though their emotional state is something you are supposed to manage, solve, or at the very least not make worse. You adjust your behavior to prevent discomfort in others. You soften the truth to avoid reactions. You carry the emotional weight of rooms you didn't create the temperature of. And you do it automatically, reflexively, as though it were your job. This looks from the outside like being deeply caring, like being a good friend, a reliable partner, the person everyone turns to. But the over-responsibility for others' emotions has a specific origin in sin. In a household where no one managed the child's emotional needs, the child often begins managing the parents, not because they were asked to, but because in the absence of anyone modeling emotional responsiveness, the child fills the gap, becoming the emotional regulator the adults couldn't be. The result in adulthood: a person who is hyper-attuned to everyone else's emotional state and chronically disconnected from their own. Who knows how to make other people feel better and has no reliable model for making themselves feel anything at all. Habit 7. Treating yourself with a harshness. You would never apply to someone else. If a friend came to you with the same struggles you carry, you would be kind. You would listen without judgment. You would offer the understanding that what they're going through makes sense, that they are not failing, that they are doing the best they can. And when you turn that lens on yourself, something changes. The kindness disappears. What replaces it is a voice that is sharper, colder, more exacting than anything you would ever direct at another person. A voice that says, "You should be over this by now. You should be better. You're being weak. You're making excuses." This double standard, compassion outward, cruelty inward, is one of the clearest behavioral signatures of childhood emotional neglect. When a child's emotional experience is not validated, not reflected, not acknowledged as real and worthy of response. The child does not conclude that the adults are failing. The child concludes that their emotions are not valid, and the adult who carries that conclusion forward becomes someone who extends to others the compassion that was never modeled toward them, while treating their own inner life with the same neglect they grew up in. You learn to be harsh with yourself in a specific environment. The harshness was not a character you chose, it was the only template available. Habit 8. Struggling with self-discipline. Not because you're lazy, but because no one taught you how. You struggle with things that other people seem to do effortlessly, maintaining routines, following through on intentions, sustaining motivation over time, managing your own behavior without external structure holding it in place. And you have called this laziness, or lack of discipline, or simply being the kind of person who can't get it together. But self-discipline is not a character trait, it is a skill, a set of internal capacities for self-regulation, emotional management, and delayed gratification that are learned primarily in the early relationship between a child and a caregiver. A child who is soothed learns to self-soothe. A child whose emotional states are co-regulated by an attuned adult learns, over time, to regulate their own. When that co-regulation doesn't happen, when the child is left to manage their own emotional states without modeling, without scaffolding, without the external structure that is supposed to become internalized, the skill doesn't fully develop. Not because the child is deficient, because the training didn't happen. The difficulty you have with self-discipline is not evidence of a character flaw. It is the predictable result of a missing input. And the compassionate response is not to try harder, but to recognize what wasn't taught and build it now from the ground up with the patience that should have been available to you the first time. Habit 9. A complicated relationship with your parents that you can't quite explain. You love your parents, or you think you do, or you know you're supposed to. The feeling is real, but it comes with a quality of distance, of something unresolved, of a gap that you have never been able to close or fully explain. They weren't bad parents. You know this. They provided. They showed up. They did the things that parents are supposed to do. And yet, something in the relationship has always felt slightly off. Not wrong enough to confront. Not right enough to fully relax into. This is perhaps the most confusing legacy of CEN. The relationship with the parent is not damaged in any way that makes narrative sense. There is no villain, no clearly identifiable harm, no story that would explain the distance to someone on the outside. Just the persistent sense that the emotional connection, the felt sense of being truly known and responded to by your parent, was never fully established. And so you exist in a complicated in-between, loving people who did their best while carrying the effects of their best not being quite enough in the area that mattered most, respecting their effort while grieving, quietly, the thing they couldn't give, knowing that both of these truths are real and that neither one cancels the other. You don't have to choose between gratitude and grief. Both fit. Both are allowed. Habit 10. The strange guilt of grieving. Something that didn't happen. This is the habit that holds all the others in place, and the one that is hardest to move through. Somewhere inside you there is grief. Real grief for the childhood that looked fine but felt incomplete, for the emotional responsiveness that other people seemed to receive, and you didn't, for the version of yourself that might have developed differently if someone had simply noticed what you felt and responded to it. And right beside the grief, inseparable from it, is guilt. Guilt for feeling something so large about something so invisible. Guilt for grieving parents who tried. Guilt for needing more than what was given when what was given was, by external standards, enough. This The guilt of grieving an absence is one of the most defining features of CEN because the wound has no visible cause, the grief has no visible justification. And a person raised in an environment that didn't validate their emotions is especially unlikely to grant themselves permission to feel grief that doesn't come with a tidy explanation. But grief does not require justification. It requires only a real loss. And the loss of emotional presence, the loss of being fully seen, responded to, emotionally held during the years when that holding builds the foundation of who you become, is a real loss. Even when the people responsible for it were doing the best they could. Even when there is no one to blame. You are allowed to grieve something that didn't happen because the thing that didn't happen was supposed to, and its absence shaped you. And naming that fully without apology is not self-pity, it is accuracy. 10 habits. None of them caused by something that was done to you. All of them caused by something that wasn't. Childhood emotional neglect is the wound of absence. It is the shape left by conversations that didn't happen, emotions that weren't mirrored, a child who was physically cared for and emotionally unseen. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't create stories. It creates a particular kind of adult, capable, self-sufficient, frequently impressive, who carries, underneath all of it, the quiet sense that something fundamental is missing. And that sense is not imaginary. It is not dramatic. It is not an exaggeration or an excuse. It is the honest recognition of a gap in what you were given, a gap that shaped how you relate to yourself, to your emotions, to your needs, and to everyone around you. You are not broken. You are under-equipped in a specific area, the area of emotional connection to yourself, because the environment that was supposed to build it didn't. And the thing about gaps is that they can be addressed. Not quickly, not easily, not by deciding to feel differently, but through the slow, patient, often uncomfortable work of learning, as an adult, what should have been learned in childhood. That your emotions are real, that your needs are valid, that the full experience of being you is something that deserves response. That work is available to you. It has always been available to you. What has not always been available is the recognition that you needed it, because the wound itself taught you that needing was the problem. It wasn't. The needing was always the right response to the absence, and recognizing that is where something different begins. If this video named something, share it with someone who might be carrying the same absence without a name for it. Sometimes the most useful thing one person can offer another is the language for something they've been feeling their entire life. Take care of yourself. We'll see you in the next one.